Okay, if we could make a start now, please. Just to let you know, I've got the onset of the lurgy at the moment. I've got a really sore throat. So if I start becoming really quiet, then let me know. I'm having a problem projecting my voice, so just let me know that in advance. Okay, today we're looking at what's called radical criminology. Okay. Now, just to remind you where we're at in terms of the module, again, just to draw those linkages so we know where we're at in terms of the whole story, so to speak. You'll remember that everything that we're looking at in this module from this semester onwards has one thing in common, and that's that it's a radical or a critical approach. Okay, and no more so is this evident than what we're going to be looking at today with what's called radical criminology. Okay, this is really kind of radical in approach, and very criticism, critical is at the heart of what they seek to do. Okay, now, broadly speaking, I need to clarify to you there are a range of different terminologies that are used on this particular subject. So let me just clarify what they are, just so you know in advance. Sometimes radical criminology is referred to as critical criminology. Okay? Radical criminology is also sometimes referred to as left idealism. Left idealism. Okay? So you'll find that some of these terms are used interchangeably: left idealism, critical criminology, or radical criminology. Another term that's often used in this kind of, when people talk in this type of tradition, is neo-Marxist. Neo-Marxist. Okay? So you tend to find that all of these different terms are used when they're talking about this type of, when they're adopting this type of approach to the study of crime. So all of these different terms and all these different approaches are critical and radical in their approach. Okay, that's the one thing they have in common. So really then what we're saying here then is that these approaches represent a plurality of voices. Do you remember last week I said to you that labelling perspectives aren't a theory? In some ways this is very similar, because these approaches represent a plurality of voices then. Okay? There's a range of perspectives. There's Marxist perspectives, post-Marxist perspectives, neo-Marxist perspectives, for example. So there's different ways of adopting this critical approach. Okay, so there's a plurality of voices. So if you have difficulties grasping the essence of what it is they're trying to say, that's because they don't really know themselves in some cases. You know, these guys will kind of disagree on very, very minor but also very important points as well. So be aware of that. Okay, there's a kind of a slippage in the usage of the term. Okay, right. There are some things that these approaches have in common. Okay, and that's this: they see society as a monolith, or as a system. Okay, we're familiar with this. We've looked at this before. So society is seen as a monolith. It's an entity made up of a variety of different aspects, and all these aspects are related there. Okay? So, that's the background to this. Anyway, that's the starting point really, and there is some confusion and some confusion in terms of the use of terminology. Okay, now, in order to explore this approach in a bit more depth, we need to be aware of what's called the central dynamic. Okay? Some of you would have looked at Marxism before. Just give me an idea. Just put your hand up if you've looked at Marxism before. Just give me... Some of you, who's never heard of Marxism? Anyway, is Marxism new to some of you? You've all heard, some of you maybe? No? Right, so you're all familiar with Marxist approaches, good. Marxist approaches then say that all social arrangements, everything, all social arrangements and social reality can all be explained and understood with reference to the central dynamic. Okay, all social arrangements then are understood with reference to the central dynamic. So all social reality, all social arrangements. So that begs the question then, what is the central dynamic? Right, so already then we're aware that this concept, the central dynamic, lays at the heart of a Marxist approach. So we need to be really clear about what the central dynamic is. Okay, and I'm going to go on to explain to you what the central dynamic is. So I just want you to basically be very clear at this stage that everything that Marxists say, or most of what they say, relates back to what we're about to explain. Okay, so it's really important you understand this. Okay, so right. The central dynamic consists of what they call the base and the superstructure. The base and the superstructure. So all social reality can be understood with reference to this. This is like an architectural analogy. Okay? So the base is kind of like a house. The base, so here's the base. The base is obviously the base, it's the foundations. The superstructure of the house is built upon the base. Okay? So the base is kind of the foundations to this. So it's an architectural analogy. So what is the base then? Right, the base, according to Marxists, is the economic base. Okay, so you need to understand the economic base. The economic base is the mode of production. Okay, the mode of production. Now the mode of production currently, well, there's different modes of production, you're aware of different modes of production. So there is a feudal mode of production, and there's a capitalist mode of production. Okay? There's also a socialist mode of production as well. Okay? Really, the base relates to this. Property relations. Okay? And in particular, individuals' relationship to that, or the group relationship to that. So, according to Marxists then, everything is understood with reference to the central dynamic, and the central dynamic consists of the base and the superstructure. In the same way that a house will be shaped by the size of the base, for example. If you've got a bigger base, you can have a bigger house. If you've got a small base. So the base will shape the superstructure. So this shapes the superstructure. Okay? It informs the superstructure. And you're probably thinking, well, what is the superstructure? Well, let me tell you. The superstructure is all non-economic institutions. All non-economic institutions. Okay? And likewise, if the base shapes the superstructure will also reinforce the base. So there's a dynamic going on here. So the superstructure, in many ways, will rise from the base. Okay, in the same way that we've got this kind of architectural analogy here in the house. Okay, the base, the foundations will affect the superstructure. So let's think then. Let's try and get our head around this, because it's really important we understand this, because everything they say comes from this. Can you give me the name of some non-economic institutions? Institutions that are not economic in nature. Yes, thank you.
Religion.
Religion, brilliant. Religion. Any others? There's lots of them. Just shout them out.
Family.
Family, brilliant.
Education.
Education, geniuses, brilliant. Others? Lots of them.
Political.
Political, so all political institutions.
God.
Sorry? What's that? I didn't hear, sorry. Oh, I don't speak to ignore me again. What other institutions? What about the institutions that we're interested in as criminologists?
Legal.
Legal institutions, yeah. Legal institutions, so criminal justice system, for example, and the institutions that are made up by the criminal justice system. Yeah? Right, so all institutions then are influenced by the base, by economic relations, but at the same time, these institutions will reinforce that base. How does this work then? Right, well, let's take this one. Let's take the family. Somebody mentioned the family, didn't you? In what way does the family reinforce the base, and in what way is the family influenced by the base? Let's use this as an example. How can we use, so everything that the Marxists say then comes back to this. In order to understand all social relations, we need to have reference to this, the central dynamic. And the central dynamic is this, it's this architecturality, the base and the superstructure. Okay? The base informs the superstructure, and the superstructure will in turn reinforce the base. Okay? So all these institutions, all these economic institutions then will be shaped by the base and likewise reinforce it. Let's take the family. Right. How is the institution of the family reflective of the base? Any thoughts? And likewise, how is the family how does the family reinforce the base?
Is family like a primary institution in society, so that's the base, and then they're reinforced into superstructure because they're exploited?
Yeah, you're almost there, right, brilliant. Okay, so how is the structure of the family informed by the base? Well, what is the base consist of? Well, these mode of production. So at the moment, we have a capitalist mode of production. Previously, we had a feudal mode of production. Okay? So the institution of the family, all of these institutions are going to reflect this then, aren't they? Okay? So now, for example, we have a capitalist mode of production. How does this capitalist mode of production inform the family then? Well, it does so in a very important way. If you look at the onset of modernity with the Industrial Revolution, the nature of the family, the institution of family, significantly changed. So before, in feudal times, the family was a productive unit. So there was no welfare state, so people would have lots and lots of children. Because when you got elderly, you would want your children to be able to support you, because there's no National Health Service, so you want your children to be able to support you. The more children you have, the more potential money you have as well, because all these children will contribute to the household. So the family is also an economic unit, isn't it? Okay, and it's a big economic unit. You would have aunts and uncles all kind of helping out, grands and granddads helping out. So it would be an extended kinship network. Are you familiar with that term? So the family would be a big unit. It would be a big productive economic unit. The onset of modernity, the onset of the Industrial Revolution, remember our timeline? The onset of capitalism. Capitalism changes the way that the family is structured. How does it do that then? If you've got this big unit, this big economic unit, it becomes cumbersome and unwieldy. So the family unit needs to be mobile. So under capitalism, you need to go where the work is. You need to be a mobile unit. So you need to be able to pick up and go to the cotton mills in Lancashire. You need to be able to move. You need to be able to go to Newcastle where the coal mines are. You need to be able to move where the work is under the requirements of what capitalism requires you to do. Okay, so it needs to be a mobile unit. So how does the family as an institution change then? In what way does the family change in order to meet these needs of capitalism? What does it need to do? It needs to adapt. Brilliant. In what way does it adapt? You're absolutely right. What is the character of this adaptation? Does it still need to be this big? Do you need lots of aunts and uncles still? No, you need to be streamlined. So you go from an extended family to a nuclear family. Brilliant. A nuclear family. Mum, dad, 2 children. So can you see there how this, the feudal capitalist mode of production, influences this institution? Can you see that? Yeah? So if that changes, so if it's a feudal mode of production, if it's a feudal base, yeah, you want a big family. You want the institution family to be big because you want lots of children that are going to be able to support you and bring into the house. But under capitalism, you want a smaller, more mobile unit, a nuclear family. So the institution of the family changes according to the base, according to this, the mode of production. Is that making sense? Yes? Right, likewise then, if the family is informed by the base, the family as an institution will also reinforce the base in return. How does the family reinforce the base? How does it reinforce this mode of production? What does it give back? What does this family now give back to the base? How does it reinforce this mode of production? Any thoughts? What is the family giving back as a nuclear unit? Well, the family provides the economic base with the mobility that it needs. So it's adapted, doesn't it, to use the term that you just used. So the family is adapting and kind of will reinforce this base. It becomes more adaptive. It provides the economic base with the labour that it needs in order for it to work. Yeah, so the children are the next workforce, effectively. So can you see how this dynamic is working? Yeah? Let me give you another example then, just so we're clear. It's really important. Everything flows from this. Let's take the system of education. How does the system of education as an institution, how is it reflective of the base? Any thoughts? Yes.
It provides the necessary education for the workforce. So if they need, like now, we need more technological education, so education provides that.
You're a genius. So basically the education system, the institution of education, will adapt to the requirements of the economic base. So if you need, if you've got a feudal system, your education system, you don't need a formal education system, you just need children and people to be able to work the fields. That's not particularly technical, whereas now, capitalism requires you to have a whole range of kind of different skills because that's the requirements of capitalism for you to be productive in these social arrangements or in these economic relations. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, are you getting the hang of this? Everything can be understood in relation to the central dynamic, this architectural analogy. Do you want me to give you one more example? Or do you get it? Speak to me. Who would like one more example? Would you like one more?
How does religion?
Okay, I'll explain to you about religion. Religion, again, will be informed by the base. Okay, so your religious arrangements then are a reflection of these economic, the economic mode of production. Religion serves. Karl Marx famously said. Try and remember the quote now. He said, let me get this right. Religion is the sire of the oppressed creature, the sentiments of a heartless world, the soul of soulless circumstances. Religion is the opium of the people. That's what he said. What was he saying there? What's the essence of what Karl Marx was saying about it? Was he a fan? No. Religion is the opium of the people. It's the sire of the oppressed creature, the sentiments of a heartless world. It's a beautiful quote, isn't it? It's the soul of soulless circumstances, the sire of the oppressed creature, the sentiments of a heartless world. It's the religion. It's the opium of the masses. What's he saying?
That is a comfort blanket.
Pardon?
That means a comfort blanket for like proletariat.
It's basically providing comfort where there isn't any, but it's providing comfort in soulless circumstances. So it's a false hope. Because what religion does is, according to Karl Marx and Marxists, is that it provides comfort where there is any. And what it does is it reaffirms and enables the continuance of these really bad situations, of the situation of exploitation. It's the opium of the masses. So he's saying that, the masses become addicted to this. The most exploited countries, will be the most religious countries, because religion is providing them with something. It's providing them with this comfort when there is no other comfort. But it's a false comfort. What it's doing is keeping people oppressed. It's keeping people from recognising and freeing themselves from the shackles of tyranny and of oppression. That's what Karl Marx is saying about religion. So he's saying then that religion basically reinforces the base. It tells people, that famous Victorian song, rich man at his castle, poor man at its gate. Accept your lot in life. That's what that's saying. Accept the status quo. Accept your lot. Don't rebel against this. Basically, accept your lot. Kind of rich man in his castle, poor man at his gate. You must accept your lot in life. And at the end of the day, you might have a shit life now, but the afterlife is going to reward you with plenty of riches. Stay where you are effectively. Don't fight the oppression that you face. That's what religion is saying. It's kind of, according to Karl Marx, it's kind of promoting this idea of kind of, just accept what you have. Accept the oppression that capitalism is providing you with. Okay? So again, religion serves as a mechanism of oppressing the masses, according to Karl Marx, because it basically keeps people suppressed, it keeps people oppressed, rather. Does that make sense? Yeah, I mean, you don't have to agree with it, obviously, but that's really... But it's an example of what they're saying about the central dynamic and this architectural analogy acting as a way of kind of reinforcing each other. Okay, so there's a relationship between these two. Is that clear now? Right, let me give you one more example. One more that's more relevant to what it is that we're studying as criminologists. Let's look at punishment. Let's look at the institution of punishment. Now, in 1925, Russian Kirkheimer wrote a book called Punishment and Social Structure. I think it was Punishment and Social Structure. Russian Kirkheimer. Old book, say 1925. Now, in this book, what they do is they say that there's a relationship between modes of production, okay, and styles of punishment, okay, or forms of punishment. So there's a relationship between the two. So let's have a look at this and let's see what they say. They say that the type of punishments that are used reflect economic conditions, okay, and they provide some examples. So let's look at let's apply this concept. So they're saying the type of punishments you get reflect the economic conditions. Yeah. Let's take transportation. Transportation was a form of punishment that was used. So convicts were sent to places like Australia, weren't they, in their thousands. Now, according to Russian Kirkheimer, this wasn't just a convenience. This wasn't just a way of kind of just pushing out the people that we didn't want anymore. He said that there was something much more, or they said there was something much more, something more economic. There was an economic driver of this. There's an economic reason why this happened. According to the debate, so they said that Australia, if you think about it, Australia was a huge nation, but it didn't have enough labour. There wasn't enough people there to extract the huge resources that Australia had. So what do you need then? You need a workforce in order to extract those resources. You have an indigenous population, you have Aborigines. The Aboriginals, as you know, are famously, they move around, don't they? They're not fixed in one area, and they weren't interested in getting involved in this kind of enterprise. So you've got surplus labour in the UK in the name of criminals. Send this surplus labour to Australia to be used as a mechanism to extract these resources. So, transportation as a mode of punishment reflects these economic conditions, okay, or the economic demands. Let's look at the 1960s, for example. If we look at, here's our crime rate. Okay, 1960s begins to, crime rates begin to go up. Okay, but at the same time that these crime rates were appearing to go up, okay, this period here, there was a massive shortage of labour. Okay? In fact, some of your parents may be in this country as a direct result of this. the motherland, England, sent out the message to the colonies, didn't it, and said, your labour, we need you in the motherland, we need you in this country. Famously, London buses, there weren't enough bus drivers, so the call went out to the West Indies, come and drive our buses, you can have a better life here. So there was a lack of labour, so the call went out to the colonies to come to the motherland to rescue it, to save the nation. Interestingly, or not interestingly, not coincidentally anyway, according to Rush and Kirkhope didn't say this because obviously they were writing in 1925, but we're applying this concept. In the 1960s, what was the guiding discourse? What was the discourse that was used in terms of punishment? Were we punishing people? Were we rehabilitating them? Was it about retribution, deterrence? Does anybody know? During this period in the 1960s, it was what was called the rise of the rehabilitative ideal. It was all about rehabilitation in the 1960s. There was this kind of real belief that we could rehabilitate criminals. Cautioning was really, really popular. Let's caution individuals. Do you remember last week we said that some of the policy that comes from labelling theory is that we should divert offenders from the criminal justice system because of the stigmatisation. Well, in the 1960s it was felt that what we needed to do was not to criminalise individuals, but we needed to rehabilitate them. Okay, so big rehabilitation. Now this, according to the Rush and Kirkhope model, is not coincidental. What do you think they were saying? Or what they didn't say this because obviously they weren't around. But what do you think they might have said about this? Because they're not saying it's coincidental that we're rehabilitating. They're saying that it informs the economic. It's informed by the economic base. What was going on? Any thoughts? I think so. The thoughts. What Rush and Kirkhope would say was that there was, during this period then, there was a lack of labour. Because there was a lack of labour, you don't want to punish or lock away your criminals. Because if you've got a lack of labour, you've got a potential important resource there, haven't you? So you need to basically make these people, these criminals, productive workers again. So rehabilitate them, send them back into the workplace. They're a really important asset. So you can't just basically bung them in prisons and forget about them. And likewise, when you've got a recession, when you've got not enough jobs and too many workers, you've got high unemployment, you might as well just bang up your prisoners for long periods of time because they are excess to your needs. So can you see how, according to this approach then, the modes of penality, the modes and the styles of punishment reflect the economic base. It reflects the requirements of capital, of capitalism. Can you see that? Yeah? There's something quite intuitive, something quite persuasive about this. So then, the relations of production, the base is informed by and also reinforced by the base and the superstructure. Okay? So transportation is a good example of how that was used. Okay, right. Have we all got our head around that? Do you all understand that? That's because everything they say from now flows on from that, so it's important we understand it. So if you don't understand, say, and I'll go through it again. Does anybody want me to go through it again? Otherwise, I'll assume that you understand it. Yep. So we all understand it. Good, brilliant. It's pretty straightforward. It's a kind of one supports the other, basically. That's really what they're saying. Okay, let's give it this. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to look at a bit more detail at what they say about criminal justice. In order to understand crime, criminal justice, what must we do then if we're going to adopt this approach? We must refer to... No. Well, in a way, yes, in a way, but what type of context? According to neo-Marxists, we must, the central dynamic, that's what we must refer to, isn't it? So, in order to understand the law and the legal system or the criminal justice system or the criminal process, we must have reference to the central dynamic. What is the central dynamic? It is, I've just spent the last 20 minutes explaining what is the central dynamic. It is So base and superstructure, right, so the base and the superstructure, okay, that reinforces that, so that informs that, and the superstructure is reinforcing the base. So what's our starting point here? Right, let's take the law. What do you think they say about the nature of law? Given what we've said. What do you think they'd say that the law is a fair instrument? No, thank you. Right. The law then is not this neutral instrument. It doesn't represent this neutral bulwark of justice that we all think it does. The law is constructed by a dominant class, and it's constructed in a way that supports the dominant class as well. It's constructed in a way that supports the interests of a dominant class, because society is made up of classes. Do you remember we said that everything comes from the base? The base, and people's relationship to the base will affect this whole process. So let me give you an example of how this operates. So they're saying that the law is not this neutral instrument. This guy here, William Chambliss, okay, he's one of the old Marxists. He's pretty informative, and he gives us an example. So let's work with the example, because it's often useful for us to use examples in order to understand what's going on. Chambliss was looking at the imposition. He was looking at the way in which laws were created in relation to imperialism. And he says that in the, I think it was the northeast of Africa, the English imperialists wanted to establish coffee plantations. Okay, so I have no idea what a coffee plant looks like, but these are coffee plants. Here's a coffee plant. Right now, these coffee, does that look like a coffee plant? No, what does a coffee plant look like? So these are coffee plants. Right now, what you've got is you've got an indigenous population. Okay, the indigenous population were nomadic. They moved around. They weren't fixed in one place. But the English imperialists had conquered this land, so what you've got then is a resource, okay? So you can grow these coffee plantations, build these coffee plantations. But in order for this to work, you need labour, don't you? Right. Your indigenous population is nomadic, they move around. So what you do is then, and this is what Chambliss noticed that the English imperialists did, they created a law, they passed a law that said a tax is going to be leviable, okay? These people here, the indigenous population, had to pay this tax. Failure to pay the tax would lead to imprisonment, okay? Now, conveniently for the English imperialists, they said that in order for you to pay this tax, what you must do is you must work on these coffee plantations in order to pay this tax. Okay, so basically what you've done is that you've ensured that your nomadic population are going to be fixed in one area, because they moved around. They didn't want to basically stay in one place, but now they have to pay this tax in order simply to be. Okay, so this, according to William Chambliss, is an example of how the law is used in a way to promote the interests of a dominant class over a subordinate class. Okay? And you might remember, just thinking back to when we looked at Durkheim. Durkheim saw society as this kind of plant, didn't he? He said that everything's interrelated, interconnected, and everything's working together. Do you remember he said that? And kind of the plant evolves, doesn't it? Well, the Marxists, on the other hand, they look at society in a very different way. They look at it as a whole, as a system, in the same way as Durkheim. But what they say is, they say that rather than being rather than there being this consensus at the heart of society, the one thing that's at the heart of society is conflict. Conflict is at the heart of society. Their focus is on the character and the nature of that conflict that lies at the heart of all social relations and all social reality. So the law then is not this neutral instrument. It's part of the oppressive state apparatus. That's the term that Althusser uses. It's part of the oppressive state apparatus. William Chambliss goes on and he says that if you look at property law is much more well established in the English legal system. And he said that this isn't coincidental. This again is the dominant property classes maintaining their power, maintaining their order, maintaining their oppression over the subordinate class. Because without resources, without property, you are nothing. You have nothing to sell but your labour. Do you understand the general principles of what capitalism is? Because we talk about it, but I'm not sure if we fully understand it. What is capitalism? Because obviously if we're going to take this approach, everything relates back to capitalism, these economic modes of production, we need to understand what capitalism really does. And what does it do? What is it based upon? Because we just assume that there are no other modes of production, there are no other ways of doing things. But there are other ways of doing things. But we're just basically kind of fed this diet that this is the only way that social arrangements and economic arrangements can be ordered. What is capitalism? Any thoughts? What do you think? You were nodding, weren't you? You've got a view on this.
I thought it was to do with class conflict.
Class conflict flows from capitalism. Capitalism is premised on the private ownership of capital. The private ownership of capital. So your position in society, your role in society, is guided by your relationship to capital. So if you own capital, if you have access to the means of production, wealth, kind of resources, then you can use that. If you don't have access, if you don't have capital and resources, according to the Marxist then, the only thing that you have to sell is your labour. You only have your labour to sell. Right, let's give an example. Let's basically bring this down to reality so we can understand what capitalism is. Can I use, can we have 3 volunteers? Just need 3 volunteers. Can I use you 3 there? Yeah, is that okay? If I ask somebody else, they're just going to not engage in the process. So I'll ask you because I know you're about to help. Right, okay. The 3 of you, right. So on the left, okay, you own a factory, okay, and in your factory, so you own a farm. So you own the means of production. You've got property, okay. On your farm, you're going to grow chicken. You're going to breed chickens. You're not going to grow chickens. You're going to breed chickens, okay? And you're breeding these chickens in order to sell them, okay, to make a profit. Because capitalism is about the accumulation of wealth, okay, and also the promotion of profit. So you've got your chickens. Now, you're going to grow your chickens. You're going to feed your chickens. Now, over a period of time, you're going to want to sell them, aren't you? Okay, and you're going to sell them to the person sitting next to you. Okay, you are a manufacturer, so you're going to take her chickens and you're going to cut their heads off and you're going to pluck them and you're going to make them all nice. Okay, and then what you're going to do is you're going to sell them to the person next to you who owns a shop. Okay, you own a shop, and you're going to basically sell these chickens. Right, you're going to sell the chickens for £1 each. Okay, if you've got a farm, you're going to sell them for £1. You're going to basically produce. You're going to manufacture them. You're going to pluck them. That involves a cost, doesn't it? Okay, and that's going to cost you, say, 50p, but you need to make a profit. So you're going to sell them to the supermarket for £2. Okay, so you're now selling these chickens for £2. The person sitting next to you, you don't own a shop, you don't own the manufacturer, you don't own the property. All you have is your labour to sell. You work for the supermarket. Okay, right now. You're in the business of making a profit. So you're going to sell your chickens for £2? No, you're going to sell them for £3, aren't you? Okay? And you're going to pay her enough money for her to live, but so you can still make a profit. Okay? So this is all worked on the basis then of each of you are making a profit. Okay? So it's the accumulation of wealth. Your relationship to that depends upon your access to this wealth, your access to these resources, yeah? All of this flows from that, okay? So they say then that those that, if you like, the haves, those that have these resources, they create social arrangements that it suits their interest to do. So you're going to want to create property law that says that you're not allowed to trespass on your property. You want that protected, don't you? That's why we have trespass law, because you want to protect your property. You don't want people taking it from you. That's why we have theft laws. You don't want somebody taking it from you, do you? All of these laws then are very well established in law. They go back hundreds of years. They form a huge part of our law called the common law. So this law, the law as it's constructed then isn't this neutral instrument. Chambliss talks about the imposition of the vagrancy laws, the 1349, the vagrancy laws, and he says that during this period, the vagrancy law, there'd been a Black Death, there'd been this massive great big plague. Half the community had been, half the country, half the population of the country had been wiped out by this plague. So they introduced the vagrancy laws. Lots of people were begging on the streets. And they were begging because they didn't have any food and they were starving. So this law was introduced that said that any employer, if they wanted somebody to work for them, you couldn't refuse. Okay, so you had to work for them if an employer said. And more importantly, it became a criminal offence to give food or shelter to beggars. Now, again, Chambliss says that this law clearly indicates that those in power wanted to create a situation whereby the law could be used to protect their interests. If you've not got enough employees, you've not got enough labour, you want to force people to work. So you use the law to enable that to happen. And you prevent people giving money to the poor. So you want to get them back into the workplace if you can. So you can imagine these employers were paying people a pittance in order to work for them. But the law was saying you had to do it. So again, the law isn't this neutral instrument. When you look at the legal system, judges tend to come from a very unique type of background. They tend to be white, they tend to be privately educated, Eton and Harrow, these sort of places. So basically, the way the system is designed, the system is designed to perpetuate, to keep these inequalities occurring. So that, us that are basically at the bottom of this, basically we don't have the same chances as everyone else. Private education, again, is designed to perpetuate this situation. Eton and Harrow, people that go to Eton and Harrow aren't any more educated than what you are, more intelligent than you are, but they're told they're more intelligent, and then when they leave Eton and Harrow, they go to Oxford and Cambridge, and all of the best jobs are reserved for these people. And then they're given the best advantages in life. You'll meet people when you go into the workplace that got a first from Cambridge, okay, and you'll look at them if they're really intelligent, first from Cambridge, well, that's pretty impressive. But 60% of people from Oxford and Cambridge come out of the first, and quite right, you should come out of the first from Oxford and Cambridge on the basis of the education that they're given and the privileges they received on the way to that education as well. They've been given the best that money can buy. So this system perpetuates and reinforces itself then, doesn't it? And this is what these guys are saying. They go on to say many other things as well, but that's the basis of their approach. The basis of their approach is to recognise this. Society is riddled with conflicts, and it's based upon people's relationship to the mode of production. That's the essence of what these guys are saying. Everything comes back to this conflict, and the basis of this conflict is this: capitalism. Think about it. Capitalism, what does capitalism do? It's about the accumulation of wealth, the accumulation of profit, a dog-eat-dog mentality. Built into capitalism is this notion that there will be winners and there will be losers. This is recognised by capitalism. There will be winners, there will be losers. Some will win, some will fail. This is recognised. Hopefully you're going to be one of the ones that win, but won't be tied to if you're one of the ones that loses. Okay? So it's based upon competition, survival of the fittest in many ways. Capitalism. Capitalism, what does it promote? It promotes greed, doesn't it? It promotes a dog-eat-dog mentality. Sod you, Jack, I'm all right. That kind of mentality. Competition is the order of the day. Margaret Thatcher was famous for this kind of approach. It was competition. Let's have the free market. Let's introduce, let's deregulate the market. Let there be survival of the fittest in the marketplace. She was a massive advocate of that. Deregulation of the marketplace as well. So, if you promote this attitude of dog eat dog, it's not then surprising that they're going to be losers. And more often than not, those losers will end up in prison. Go into prisons and look at the people that are in there. The people that you find in prison are the vulnerable, the dispossessed, I just made that word up, dispossessed even, the dispossessed. Those people that have really been failed by society. You know, you might think that, you know, criminals are these kind of really bad, mean, horrible people, but when you look at the backgrounds they've had, you know, some of them are just basically, you know, real kind of victims of society. You know, mums and dads splitting up, mums and dads being abusive to each other, brothers and sisters killing each other. You know, real kind of vulnerable people. They are, in many cases, the excesses of capitalism. They've been fouled by capitalism, but capitalism recognises that that will be the case, that there will be losers. They are the excess of capitalism. Hide them away. Look at the way prisons are now built. In Victorian times, prisons used to be built in very working class areas. Look at Pentonville Prison. Look at Holloway Prison. Look at Wormwood Scrubs. These were in really poor areas of the city. It's a really big visible sign of the power and the influence of the state. You don't toe the line, this is where you're going to end up. Okay? Islington famously was one of the only areas that the police would refuse to police during the Victorian times. It was that bad. Put Pentonville Prison there, show these people the power of the state. You don't toe the line, that's just where you're going to end up. Now, where are prisons built now? You don't know where they're built. They're built out in these, like, kind of right out in the countryside. Literally, some of them are built in ditches to hide away the excesses of capitalism. We don't really want to know about what's going on in these places. This is where we put the excesses of capitalism, the people that have kind of lost in this big competition that we call capitalism. Right, they go on to say many other things, but let's leave it here at the moment. Because otherwise we're going to get a bit more confused, I think. But that's really the essence of what they're saying. Everything comes back to the central dynamic. Okay, the relationship between the base and the superstructure. Okay, does anyone have any questions on this? Hopefully this makes some sense. Please bear in mind that this is kind of like an overview. There's a lot more that they say as well, but we obviously can't cover everything. But I just wanted you to get a flavour. And this stuff you need to form a view on. This is important stuff. Okay? Good, okay, I shall see you all shortly.